Good morning and welcome to our 10 minutes at 10 today, where we're going to be talking to you a little bit about travel and subsistence and what you can and can't claim through your company.
So, firstly, what exactly do we mean by travel? Now, this is when you're traveling basically in relation to your business. So it has to be wholly and exclusively
And
for the purpose of the business
necessarily,
and
and
necessary,
necessarily.
not just through choice for the sake of it. And this does cover temporary accommodation as well. Subsistence works in a similar manner. It has to be wholly, exclusively, and necessarily for the purpose of the business. And this relates to while you're traveling, incurring
Yeah.
costs for such things such as food and drink while you're traveling out about.
So, what examples are there? So, you might be traveling to a meeting, you might be traveling to meet a client, you might be traveling to meet a supplier, you could be traveling to a networking event, you could be traveling to a training course or something like that. You could be delivering something to or a supplier or to a client. Anything that the business sends you away from your normal place of work for to do, that constitutes travel. So while you're away, you can then claim some of the costs that relate to that travel experience. But there are some things that you do that are not considered travel. So, for example, if you are traveling away from your home to your work, that's a commute. Now, that's not included and that's not allowable by HMRC.
Now you can see where some of the grey areas sort of settle in around travel and subsistence. This is one of the
Yes.
reasons why, as an actual topic, it gets so many queries and so many inquiries because there is often this confusion between what is allowed, what isn't, etc.
Mm.
So it does actually cause some confusion in
Yeah,
a
and
great deal, to be honest.
this is another one of our most popular blog posts, isn't it?
Yes.
Is what can you claim travel and subsistence wise?
Mm.
Now there is one challenge with travel, and this is HMRC allows you to travel or to claim travel between your work and your permanent workplace. So what constitutes a permanent workplace? So the challenge for HMRC, or the challenge for the employee, is if it's a permanent workplace, somewhere you work on a regular basis, then you are not allowed to claim that travel cost because it's part of your regular commute. But what happens if you're travelling to a client and that client is a regular routine undertaking for you?
Mm. Now, this is often an issue for small business consultants who
Yeah.
work for the same client, as Lisa mentioned. Like IT or project consultants get hit by this quite often.
It's long-term
Yeah,
projects, isn't it? So management consultancies, things like that, always get caught by this.
and often what happens is say they spend 40% of their time during a working week on the client's site, and they actually travel, say, from Suffolk to London each day they actually work there. So they're working there for 2 days a week. After 2 years, HMRC would consider this to be a permanent workplace if it's their predominant place of work.
Well, that depends. So it's if you're working for 2 days a week at home and 3 days a week for the client, then it has to be more than 40% of your time. So the definition is 40%, and the threshold is 40%. So if
Mm.
you're doing 2 days a week at home and 3 days a week with your client, HMRC considers your permanent workplace to be your client's workplace, and after 2 years, it doesn't allow you to account for those travel costs. Now, if it's within those first 2 years and you're working from home and you've just started working on this new client, for those first 24 months, you are allowed to claim your travel costs to that client if you're working there for more than 2 days a week. So it's the 3 days a week at the client's place. If you're working 2 days a week at your client's place and 3 days a week at home, then your home constitutes your permanent workplace and it's not an issue. It's only if you're travelling to your client's workplace for more than those 2 days, for the 3 days or more a week, so it's 40% or more of your time is spent working at your client's workplace, then after 24 months, HMRC deems that to be your permanent workplace and your home or your office to be your temporary workplace. So then after those 2 years, you can no longer claim the travel and the subsistence because it considers that that's your permanent normal workplace. And that does catch out a lot of contractors and IT workers and people who have small businesses and only 1 or 2 clients. So the challenge, particularly in the latter stages of those projects, is to spend at least 3 days working from home and 2 days working on the client. And that does get tough when you're trying to balance that need and work from home, but deliver what your client asks. Because at the end of the project, when things start to get closer to fruition and delivery, that's when they want you more on site. Now, what some people do, some contractors do, is they chop and they change, and they'll have a 2-year contract, and then they'll stop that 2 years, and then they'll go somewhere else. Or they'll change employer, they'll change client, they'll change location. And that's acceptable under HMRC rules, but not if you're spending all of your time, the majority of your time working at one place for one person. That then becomes that permanent workplace. And then you can't cover your subsistence and travel costs anymore.
Yeah. So if you are travelling to a temporary workplace, what type of expenses can we actually claim for? So there's a few things we can claim for here. We can either claim for fuel if it's, say, a company-owned vehicle like a van, or we can claim for mileage if it's a personal vehicle where you're doing business miles. So you can't claim for both unless, of course, you happen to have a van, which is a business-owned, and a car. So you can't claim for both with a business-owned vehicle, and you can't claim for both if you've got a personal vehicle only. Other costs are items such as train tickets, bus tickets, taxis, congestions, tolls, parking, and not necessarily directly related to travel, but business phone calls, because you may actually make calls while you're out and about on a personal phone, but actually this is often covered by the business anyway. Well, from what we find.
Most people put one phone at least through their business accounts. So if you've got your business phone going through your business account, that's fine. But if you've got a personal phone too, and you use your personal phone for business while you're away, you can claim some of those costs if you make business calls on that line.
Yeah. And then while travelling out and about, you can also claim for coffees, you can claim for lunch, you can claim for dinner.
Yep.
Providing that it's all subsistence, you can recover VAT and corporation tax on these costs. And these can all be expensed to the company. However, if you actually decide to, this is challenge number 2. If you decide to take out a fellow course member or a client or a supplier when you're going out for subsistence, then all of a sudden this becomes corporate hospitality, not subsistence.
And then it's not deductible.
Yeah,
for
that's
VAT
the nasty
and not
little
deductible
one.
for corporation tax. So you need to watch out for that. It's often when you're away on a course, you go out and you spend, you take somebody else out for dinner, or you pay for somebody else's dinner or their drinks, and then all of a sudden you can't recover the VAT or the corporation tax on those. So watch out for that one.
There's tax advantages in you paying for your own and them paying for their own.
And then it feels a bit selfish, doesn't
rude,
it? If you
but
just
there's tax advantages to it.
or get your joint bill and split it between the two of you, and then you can call it subsistence, not hospitality, not business entertainment, and then it's all allowable. So it's a bit odd like that. Just be careful what you're spending and who you're taking out. Just, be a bit selfish if you want to recover the VAT and have it deductible for corporation tax. And then finally, we've got incidental costs. So what are incidental costs? Incidental costs are things like, say you have to spend a night out with, in a hotel, you're on location somewhere, it's too far to travel home, or you're away for several days. Well, you can claim your hotel costs, but you can't claim things like your personal laundry costs or your newspaper costs or things like that. But what HMRC do allow you to do, if you're an employee of your own company, is you're allowed to pay all employees £5 a night for incidental costs. So it does cover things like these. It might cover a packet of crisps or a drink or a coffee or something that you have incidentally, but you haven't picked up the receipt for. So you can cover those, and you can pay £5 tax-free per night for any employee staying overnight in the UK, or £10 per employee if they're staying overseas per night. And that doesn't need to go through payroll, it doesn't need to be taxed, it can just be claimed as an expense claim.
However, the amount spent on meals and accommodation, if you are claiming for it, must be deemed reasonable and appropriate. But this is, of course, judged by individual circumstances. Say, going out for a meal at the Ritz perhaps isn't going to be deemed as reasonable and appropriate if you've got the choice of, say, a Subway down the road, which is much more affordable. It's
difficult, isn't it? Because HMRC aren't going to come in and judge every spend that you have. But if you do have a compliance visit, you will be expected to explain that. So if you put through expenses that do seem overly generous and overly indulgent, HMRC may challenge you. Now, if that's typical in your industry and that's the norm for what you're doing, then generally they'd see that as being okay. But if it's not, and they feel that you're taking the mickey a little bit and overclaiming for something that's basically an indulgence and not going through payroll, then you might get into a bit of a sticky situation. So just make sure that any cost like that is properly documented and it's explained. It might be a particular client, it might be an industry event. Just keep better notes, and then there's something that HMRC can have a look at if you are ever subject to a compliance visit.
Now here comes the profit hack for travel and subsistence, because actually what we see,
biggest errors, isn't it?
Yeah, mainly it's down to errors, and actually the biggest mistakes people make are, the first one is paying for these travel expenses, these subsistence costs, all personally, but forgetting to reclaim them through the business. So it could be missing one or two, it could be missing all of them. It really does add up. You might think one meal doesn't add up. It really does, especially if you do it once a month. It suddenly starts to tally up very quickly. The second, and this one I'd probably say is more common, is forgetting to keep the receipt for the actual subsistence cost.
Or just taking the credit card slip, but not the VAT receipt. And then you've been out, you've had your dinner, you've done all the right things, but you can't recover the VAT anyway because you don't have a genuine VAT receipt. So that's probably the biggest mistake I think that we see in business. And then the biggest mistake that we don't see, as Harry says, is all the expenses that you pay for personally that you then forget to recharge. So make sure you keep a note of those, or always make sure that you pay for business spends on your business debit or credit card. If you need one, get a business expense card, and then that way you've always got a business card on you that you can use instead of your personal account. So that's it from us today. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you liked it, let us know in the comments, please. And if you have any queries about it, please let us know in the comments. So are there any expenses that you think you ought to be able to expense but aren't sure about? Do let us know and we'll answer those in the comments. So thank you very much, and we'll speak to you soon. So bye for now.
Bye.